Welcome back to Exploring Growth. So glad you're here. This is pretty exciting news I want to share with my podcast followers. About a year ago, I started Exploring Growth podcast, and I've had the opportunity to meet and interview so many great people, wonderful people, and experts in their field. And, I wanted to change. I wanted to do something new. And I figured, why not use the podcast to share some of the things that I've learned along the way in my career? So I'm starting something new. And this is the first episode in that series. What I'm doing is building a series of courses to document and share a lot of the knowledge that I picked up over the years, experience, things I've read and watched and been a part of, help clients, work for companies, putting all of that into a series of courses. And I want to share that experience of building that along the way. And that's what I'm going to do here. So we're going to start this series with the first course being how to build a strategic marketing plan. And this episode is the first module in the first course, which is identifying your buyer. And we're going to get to talk with Tim Parkin, who was my first guest when we first started the podcast, which is pretty cool, and a close friend of mine. He's also a global marketing consultant. He works with huge companies. And he's, as you'll see, an amazing guest, has a lot of information. And as you also see, the sort of format has changed a little bit in terms of how the interview is set up. These episodes are going to be used inside of the course I'm building. So you're getting a preview of what someone who buys this course will see once they get inside the course. So I hope you enjoy, and let's get to talking with Tim. I'm really excited to have Tim Parkin, a close friend and colleague and comrade in the business of marketing and consulting here. So welcome on, Tim.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to talk through everything marketing and specifically buyer personas.
Yeah. So it was almost exactly a year ago I had you on when we started this podcast. So exciting to launch off into this new kind of direction. And I wanted to have you back because I intended to whenever I decided whatever was next. I'm going to have you first again. So excited to have you here to talk about building or identifying a buyer as you're looking at building a marketing plan. So I have a series of questions here I want us to kind of walk through and talk through during this episode. And we're really thinking about this in light of a small to mid-size B2B service-based company. That's the person who's probably going to be watching this video in the course. So let's start with, this is fresh. They're starting over and saying, okay, we want to do this really well. Okay. I couldn't think of a better person to bring on and start talking about this. So I'm excited to hear your answers. Why is it important for them to dedicate time to outlining and documenting who their buyer is?
Everything in marketing and advertising is predicated on knowing who your buyer is. If you don't communicate well with the person who matters, with the person who can make the buying decision, with the person who has the money and the ability to say yes to what you're doing, then you're wasting your time and your resources and your budget. So it's fundamentally important to first and foremost understand who can actually buy what we're selling, what we're offering, and then how do we find those people and how do we create a message that's compelling to them, and how do we get that message in front of them consistently and over time. So everything, I would say, starts with figuring out who is the buyer.
And I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm building a whole course around it, right? I think that you and I are wired very similarly that, if we see a nail, we're going to be a hammer when it comes to, identifying your buyer, building a marketing strategy, doing a lot of thinking before acting. And I think there's a lot of merit to that. As you're saying, the, as I would say, the most important thing you can do for your marketing plan is to start at the beginning, and that is, who is your buyer, right? The more
Yes.
you identify about who that buyer is, and we're not talking about, the things that you should know already if you're already in business, and that is firmographically, the size company, revenue, employees, those kind of things. Maybe the role that they hold. Those are all important things, but we're also talking about more psychographic type of things, or even more of the detailed demographic type of things.
Yes.
Getting into these deeper elements and really understanding the buyer.
Yes. And I think understanding, just to underscore what you're saying, means a lot of things. And it doesn't mean what people probably have heard, that you should write out this, buyer persona of
Hmm.
a single mom who's 45, who has two kids. That stuff, some of it you already know, so you don't need to write it down. And some of it isn't going to help you. But a lot of this has to do with the triggers of why people buy, the psychology of
Yeah.
what state are people in, and what's going to motivate them to be interested, to pay attention. And also, what is their solution now? Because everyone already has a solution to their problem. It may not be the ideal solution, it may be no solution, but they have something, some way they're dealing with this problem now. And you need to understand that as part of understanding who your buyer is, what state they're in, and how you can get them from where they are to where you want them to be and where they want to be, frankly.
Yeah, and that takes me right to the next question, which is what are some of the most important aspects to define about your buyer, right? I just like want to put myself in the shoes of someone who's watching this, and that is, um, maybe you are going after small manufacturers, like I can even think specifically co-packers, in the southeast, and of those co-packers, you're dealing with the facility safety person and whatever their role may be. Okay, that's great. You're probably 40% of the way there, and now the real work starts, right? So now
Yes.
let's get into what are some other aspects about that buyer, not the account, but the buyer themselves, the ones who's going to make the decision. What should they be looking to define?
Well, you hit on something really important there, which is people buy from people, not companies.
Hmm.
And so you mentioned the buyer, the person, not the account, not the company. That's really important. We're not defining companies here. I mean, you can define that, but we need to figure out who is the person within that company that's actually going to do business with you. Within that, too, I think the volume matters a lot. That if there are 100 potential buyers for what you're selling, then you need to take a different approach than if there were 100 million potential buyers.
Hmm.
And so, how many there are is really important. But if there are more than a certain amount, regardless, you need to prioritize and focus. That you can't be all things to all people. And so, when we talk about finding out who your buyer is and digging deeper here, one of the first steps is to realize you have to choose which of the buyers that are possible out there. If you're selling to manufacturers, you could probably sell to a lot of them. Which
Hmm.
one's going to be the most profitable to you? Which one's going to be the easiest to get in front of, to access? Which ones you potentially already have inroads to? So the more you can refine and narrow down your focus on a buyer from that perspective before you even dig deeper into who
Hmm.
they really are, that will help cut out a lot of time and a lot of waste and a lot of effort, so you can narrow in on the ideal buyer. But then within that, there's a lot of things you can look at for your buyer, in terms of who they are, and again, where they came from, what situation they're in, and what their goals are. And more specifically, we can talk about psychology, but I think one of the easiest things to identify that often can be, open up floodgates for you, is the trigger. And I'll give an example of a trigger. One of my clients sells wireless fences for your home, so you can have your dog outside in the yard and they can just run around. One of the biggest triggers for that is someone moving from one house to another house because the house doesn't have a yard and now they need a yard and now they're open to this. So if you can identify a trigger like that for your buyers, then that's often a really easy way to segment them, to identify who they really are.
Hmm.
And then that leads into your message of, here's the reason why you should listen to me and here's how I can help you. So think about the triggers, because triggers are a really valuable way to identify and narrow down on a buyer.
That's unbelievably valuable because I can think of, myself personally. We have a dog, and if I put myself, again, selling person to person, in that person's shoes, I've been in that situation more times than I would like to, admit. My neighbors know our dog probably as well as we know our dog, because the dog just keeps getting on our fence. Now it's gotten better, but like when we moved 5 years ago, there was a series of things that were happening, and that wasn't something that was on our mind until it was on our mind.
Right.
So, putting yourself in the buyer's shoes about what's happening in their role, it's gonna show you the needs, it's gonna show you the pain points, it's gonna show you the inroads, it's gonna show you how to speak to them, how not to speak to them, timing. So I love
Yes.
this idea of triggers, and thinking about those first, because it opens up so many other possibilities.
Yeah, and then let me expand upon that if I may, because I
Mhm.
think the other thing is people buy an act based on emotion and then they justify with logic. And this is really important to understand when you think about your buyer, that often we think about our features and benefits of our product or service, what it can do, our case studies, our results, all that stuff. And none of that actually matters first. What matters first is the emotional investment and the belief that the buyer has. And so if you think about your buyer, you want to figure out what are their aspirations? What are the things in the future that they really want to become and to have? Not necessarily the features and benefits now. And also, what are the fears that whatever
Mhm.
pain they're experiencing, whatever problem they have, if that gets worse and in 6 months, in a year, in 10 years, what is a fear that they desperately want to avoid? You can think of it kind of like heaven and hell if you want to. What's the heaven they
Yeah.
want to achieve? What's the hell they want to get away from? And if you frame it like that, and start there, then you can uncover the emotions, and
Mhm.
emotions drive everything. And so I would start from an emotional perspective and then figure out how to address those emotions with the logical side, which is the features, the benefits, the case studies, the results, all that good stuff, the reviews you have, all of that. But start with the emotions and understanding your customers, your buyers at an emotional level.
I love it. Yeah. So, you know, kind of again, back to the specific B2B situation. How can, if I'm going through this exercise and I'm saying, okay, I'm gonna sit down and do this and try to more fully understand our buyers. How can I start this process? I know you mentioned triggers, right? That's going to be a little bit of research that's involved there.
Yes.
Let's say I don't think I have enough time, or maybe don't want to invest in, more broad research. If someone hasn't done a bunch of research, how can they quickly define characteristics of their buyer? And I can give a couple examples too.
Yeah, I think there's 4 steps, and it's really easy. Anybody can do it, and doesn't cost a lot of money or take a lot of time. The first is to go and try to be one of these people, and so try to buy what you're selling. So this means mystery shop your competition or
Hmm.
anybody similar, because you'll figure out in that process the types of questions that you're being asked and the types of problems and frustrations you see with that process or the
So
questions
true.
that you have. So go and do some mystery shopping. Then sit down and use that and use whatever research you can do to think about your buyer and again their emotions and the aspirations and fears that they have, and write that stuff down. It won't be perfect, it won't be right. That's not important right now. It's just important to get some structure. And then 3 is to go and talk to some potential customers. These
Hmm.
can be real customers that you have. They can be potential customers if you just email, message, call people and say, hey, we're creating something I think could help you. I don't want to sell it to you now, but I'd love to just ask you a few questions and get some feedback and see if we're on the right track and if this makes sense. If you do that enough, people will talk to you. You can also run surveys. There's a lot of ways to do this,
Hmm.
but go and talk to the people who you actually want to talk with,
Hmm.
because they're the only ones who can give you the actual feedback that you need. And then the fourth and final step is to come back with your team, take all this stuff and put the pieces together and say, we mystery shopped and here's what we saw and heard. We brainstormed and researched and here's what we found. And then we took all that and talked to real customers, real potential people, and here's what we heard from them. Now we have a really good idea of who they are, what they care about, what resonates with them, what doesn't. And now you have a really clear idea very quickly of who your buyer is.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think that's the hard work that a lot of business owners, operators want to skip over, and I get it. We're operating a company, cash flow is always on your mind, always want new sales, but kind of like the whole thing of going back and sharpening the sword, or sharpening the saw to cut more trees. It applies here. It's why it's important. We have to go back
Yes,
and do the hard work, which can be harder for some people than others, and ask our customers, talk to new prospects, and really kind of get in the minutia of it, and be curious and ask dumb questions. And
totally.
exactly, the I love how you've outlined it like that. It's so true. And I kind of have an anecdotal story from my past. I had a number of mentors over the years, and I had one older business gentleman who just, very wealthy, and he kind of took me under his wing for a season and was teaching me some things as an entrepreneur. And he said he was an investor, and he'd invest in different companies and help angel investor, and he would get people started. And he said, a friend of mine came to me and asked me to invest in his new battery business. It's going to be kind of one of those battery plus franchise type things, but it wasn't that name. And he said, will you invest? And he said, oh, I'll invest if you will first basically go do what you said to do. If you'll first go talk to 100% potential customers and tell them what you're doing. I'm going to start this new battery company, and this is what it's going to do. And I'd love for your feedback. And, if we ever start one day, would you be a customer? And he got, 80 to 100 yeses. And he did. He went and did all the hard work, and he brought all that data back to the investor, and the investor said, okay, you've got a business here, because tomorrow, if you open your doors, you have 80 to 100 people that will sign up
Yes.
and come buy batteries from you. And so he did. He invested, and it was very successful. So I've always kept that with me to think it's really the
Yeah.
fundamentals. It's really going back to the simplicity of talking to your current ideal customers, the customers that you have. We all have 1 to 10, in this kind of small to mid-size range, where you have a lot of customers, but you don't love them all.
Yeah.
You love a handful of them, and it's why, because you don't ever talk to them. They don't ever talk to you. It just works. They get it. You get it. So it's diving into all those conversations, like you said, and trying to figure out, why does it just work? Why do they get it? Why do we get it? Is it so symbiotic? And then looking at your other customers and saying, why does it not work with these customers? Why is it
Yeah.
always hard to get them to pay? Why is it always hard to deliver? And really building that out. I think this is the hard work
It
of
is.
identifying a good ideal buyer and a not so ideal buyer, so you can then put processes in place to identify that in future prospects.
Absolutely. And let me tell you something for those of you watching this, and you're not going to like this, but too bad, listen up. You
That's
think you know your ideal buyer, and you don't.
right.
And if you go and talk to them, you will be shocked. You'll say, everyone wants this thing, everyone loves this thing, and you'll talk to them and no one will mention it at all.
Yep.
So go and talk to them, because I've seen this time and time again. We think we know our buyer, they change, people change, culture changes. You can make assumptions, but you never know until you talk with them. So if the CEO or anybody says, we know our buyer, we know it's this person, sure, let's go talk to them and make sure. There's no harm in that. The worst case is we prove what we thought. But the best case is you learn that it's completely different than you thought. And now you have really valuable ammunition to use in your battle to reach them and to move them and change their minds. So go talk to them. You will be
Yes, for sure.
surprised.
You're 100% right. Let's shift this a little bit, and I want to get your take on, I look at bigger companies, and I've talked to a lot of marketers at enterprise level companies, and they have multiple personas that they've built, multiple buyers they've identified in maybe different markets, maybe different geographies. The bigger the company, obviously, the more complex it gets. But for this sort of small to mid-size market, would you recommend them building out multiple buyers, in going through this exercise of doing it? And if so, what would that look like?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. I think that unless your budget and your team and your amount of priorities can support it, it's a trap. And I
Mhm.
think that you can build a really big, really huge, successful company and business focusing on one buyer. Do one thing and do it exceptionally well. Don't get distracted or lured by the idea that there are multiple buyers. I think often companies, this is just strategically, they focus on too many things. They have too many product lines, too many categories, and they really shouldn't. If you're in that situation and you have no other option, I would keep it as minimal as possible. Two, three segments, two, three types of buyers. But ideally, you have one single buyer you're trying to go after. That way, everything you do, all the marketing that you're doing, can focus on that buyer, can build around that buyer. That means obviously there's supporting roles in reaching that buyer. They may not be your exact buyer, but there's someone who has influence in the company. You need to
Mhm.
talk with them. I'm not discounting that, but I'm just saying that the more you can focus your resources, your time, your attention on a single buyer, the more successful, the more impact that you'll have, and the more you'll discover how to navigate that, how to reach them, what those triggers are, what their hot buttons are, and all
Mhm.
that good stuff. So as few as possible and no more.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say, my take on that is a little more nuanced, in that I think if you really do spend the time on this, you're gonna determine that you could come at it from a couple different angles. It can be service focused. Maybe your ideal clients that you have right now, or customers, are with you because of the type of service that you provide, and all these other ancillary services are really kind of getting in the way. So you need to focus on those type of buyers who love and adore and want to buy this service. Sometimes it can be an industry, it can be a certain market that you're in. As part of this course, I'm going to give this other analogy or parallel of how I'm building out Signal Media, our content agency. And so
Right.
the example that I'm giving is that we do video and content creation for lots of different clients, but the one that we've really just hit it out of the park for is higher ed. And so recently what we've done is we've said, okay, we really get what they're trying to do. We can really move the needle for them. They really get how we work and we fit. So why don't we just explore working with more higher ed to see if that hypothesis is true? So that's the path we're going down. Now, it's not to say we're only going to be higher ed. Now, I think in some cases, some markets, you can be super niche like that and it works. You don't want to always put all of your eggs in one basket, but this kind of gets to the business model of, what does this look like? So if we're going after higher ed, we need to invest more time and resources into finding more colleges and universities to shoot video for. But I can't, take my focus completely off of other service-based businesses or, local businesses that are not higher ed that need that service as well and that are finding me. So,
Right.
I think it's sort of a tricky thing that you have to investigate, because it's not about saying we're going to serve multiple markets. I think you can get into trouble there because smaller
Yes.
companies, they only have so many resources. The bigger companies, they can dedicate a whole department to serving a market, and fail and still be in business,
Exactly.
somehow. But for our small to mid-size, we have to really dive in and see, okay, where are we winning? And,
Right.
another nuance to it, I would say, is I like to, in another part, the second part of this course, that we'll get deeper into this, but stakeholders. So if you say our buyer is the facilities manager at co-packing, small co-packing in the Southeast, well, who are the stakeholders to that buyer? There are influencers internally in the company that help to make the decision. They influence the decision. Those could sort of become um, multiple, like your multiple buyer setup, but
Right.
they're all influencing that same sale. So then it
Yes.
allows you to take a deeper approach, but you're not spreading yourself broadly. You're still going deep.
Exactly. Yes. That's very important, especially in the B2B side.
All right. So now let's say we've spent the time doing this, and we're going to kind of maybe a little bonus footage. I don't know what we'll call it, but looking forward, we've got everything in place, and we've kind of stopped what we're doing to think about it and talk to people when we've done that hard work. Now we're going to start putting our plan in place and moving things forward and putting campaigns together and doing all the things that we should do as marketers and salespeople. How First of all, how often should they revisit this document, the things that they've documented down, as you've said? How often should they look at that with their team? Let's start there.
Yeah, I would recommend at least every quarter, every
Mhm,
3 months looking at it. And that doesn't mean you need to change it. And I would encourage you not to change it.
mhm,
But every quarter, you should be reflecting on it at least. One, to remind your team, here's who our ideal buyer is, here's who we're
mhm,
going after. And in that reminding process, look at where are we deviating from this focus? Where have we stepped into territory we shouldn't? Where have we been communicating to people that we shouldn't? How has our message become more broad than specific? So use that reminder to refresh, especially if you've added new people to the company, to remind them, here's who our ideal buyer is, here's who we're going after. And then the second is to add to it or change it if you've seen evidence that you should do so. As you mentioned, where are we winning? I think it's a great
mhm,
question to ask at that point and say, where are we winning? And should we refine this? Should we change it? Should we shift it? Oh, should we double down? Should we expand it? But also throughout the quarter, customer service, your sales team, anybody in the organization will have observations and thoughts about the ideal buyer, encounters with them, observations, things they've heard or seen. Use those and get those from the team and update, improve this document to reflect that if you've heard something consistently, a pattern over time, take that into account and make that manifest in the
mhm.
document so that you can continue to evolve and improve and refine your vision of your ideal buyer. And by doing so, it'll go from this generic blurry vision to a crystal clear, laser focused ideal buyer that everybody could repeat and recite and throw a dart at the board and hit a bullseye every time of, this is the person we're going after. We all know it, and we're all taking the right steps to get there.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, and a document can get stale because things change so quickly. I guess I would just add to that. I like to think about things like an experiment, almost sort of scientific. It's a hypothesis. You're creating a document that is a hypothesis. It is an educated guess. It's not a complete guess because you've got answers from your buyers and your customers. So you're on the right track, and you're probably going to be pretty close. And you'll probably get some good wins out of it too, right away, because things will be uncovered. But as time goes on, it's not going to stay stagnant. Those answers are going to change. The market's going to change. Your services are going to. Everything changes. So as things move along, I like the quarter. Looking at things on a high level every quarter at least. I think that's a good rhythm to get in. I think if you have a marketing director or a marketing a VP or even a marketing manager, having them have access to that document and checking in and holding them accountable to checking in with that document, keeping that document really close to the campaigns that you're running, is I think very helpful. And then as we
Yeah.
move forward, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, it's just agreeing with you. Absolutely.
I'd say as we're moving forward, you're putting all your stuff in place. The next question is, how can they constantly be learning about who their buyer is becoming?
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
it's a good question. How do you hit a moving target? The
Yep.
Wayne Gretzky quote applies here that you skate to where the puck is going, not where the puck is.
Right.
And I think that that's so important, especially in today's environment where things are changing even faster than before, and with AI, they're going to accelerate even more. And buyers and people are changing so quickly as well.
Mhm.
So I think if you want to stay on top of where your buyers are at and where they're headed, the best way to do that is to be in constant conversation with them. This
Mhm.
goes back to what I said before, but not only in the beginning, talk to them to find out, who they are, what interests them, what motivates them, what the triggers are, but keep in touch with them. And this is, again, from customer support, from sales, even marketing. Everybody should be talking to the customer as much as possible. I call it customer proximity. Whoever's closest to the customer wins. And
Mhm.
if you can stay close to the customer, you have a huge competitive advantage because you get wind of these things, of what they're thinking, how they're changing, uh, at the moment of inception, rather than 6 months down the line when now you're behind the curve. So this means hang out with your buyers. Put on an event and invite them.
Mhm.
Spend time with them. Take them out to dinner and to coffee. Call them on the phone. Stay involved and engage with them. On the marketing side, if you can, create a community and get
Mhm.
your people there. Start a podcast like this one and get people to listen to it. Anything you can do to keep people engaged with you and to keep that conversation two-way open is going to help you keep tabs on what they're thinking, how they're feeling, and where they see things are changing.
Yeah, I like the podcast thing, obviously, because I have one, but I'm a marketer. I support these type of things. I think that's one of the more modern ideas for not only creating a lot of content for awareness and things as it scales, but you can easily just invite your prospects on and talk about things
Yes.
that are, near and dear to their heart, and you learn as you're talking to them about the things that you're wanting to offer them and how they're buying. So I like that a lot. The way I think about it is, especially B2B, we go so long in between seeing the proximity is not there. Historically, classically,
Right.
it's events, it's that once a year conference, it's those type of things. It's emails. It's not it's not personalized on a day to day, week to week, month to month. And I think that with the onset of digital, it's really changed things. It's changed us the nature of how we interact. And now with social media, we're given the opportunity, if we want to take it, to be in contact with at a granular level all of our buyers and partners and customers in the comment section on LinkedIn and the comment section on Instagram and the DM, of each of these platforms. Um, and all of those comments are justifying your hypothesis. They're reaffirming what you're doing, or they're changing it. And it's
Right.
also creating content at the same time that you can use in your marketing efforts to say, "Hey, look, we listened, and we
Yeah.
are re-saying what you said to us. That shows that we care about you, right?"
Totally.
So, digital platforms have given us the ability as marketers to grow in a way that we have never had access to. So we have to really change our thinking about, instead of it being this once a year annual conference, which are those are great, and there's tons of great things that can come from those. You get the political update, you get the industry update, you get all the kind of high level things that aren't really going to help you sell accounts.
Right.
Um, you can build relationships, but you can do a lot of relationship building in between.
Absolutely. Well, I think you're spot on there, and it's about relationships, right?
Mhm,
That's what you're hitting on here. And I think
mhm,
in B2B, we often think about accounts and companies rather than people, as we said. But if you can build and maintain and grow relationships, you win. I mean, period, full stop. And I
mhm,
think that one of the things right now, especially that I've seen, that you've seen, I know, is LinkedIn. That if you're in B2B and you're not on LinkedIn, the only excuse I can possibly think of is that you're in a strange market where your customers, your buyers aren't there. But outside of that, you must be on LinkedIn because it's the best way professionally to stay on top of people and build these relationships and deepen those. And it's not just about posting on social media and liking some people's comments. It's about
mhm,
really caring, really engaging with people, and even dare I say, have a CRM and track the updates there and keep tabs on people. But it's about relationships. It's about people, and I don't care how you do it, but do it and stay connected to your buyers, even past buyers, even current clients, even people who were buyers but didn't pan out, deals that didn't get won. Doesn't matter. Just stay in touch with people and build relationships. If you do that, that's 90% of it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I would just say, as a nuance to that is, if you're in the white collar kind of professional sales role, or buying, selling role, then LinkedIn is a great place, because your buyer is going to engage on LinkedIn to some degree. It may be a really small degree, but they're there updating their profile. They're looking at notifications. They're, sort of seeing what's going on. In the blue collar world, how you get a job and how you apply for jobs is a little different. You may not utilize LinkedIn. You may be utilizing Indeed or Monster, or a
Right.
local recruiter or something, job fair. And so if you identify your buyer as blue collar, because I mean, I had a client that was um, chemical manufacturing, small company, and they're selling their buyer, who's, you drive up into their bay and they're going to buy your goods and try them, and repeat buy is the goal. That buyer was a blue collar buyer. They, were not a white collar. It wasn't a white collar position. So to reach them on LinkedIn would be really difficult. But what we found is the same principle applies. It's all about building the relationship, as you said. So we just had to meet them in a different space. We knew that in between, you know, definitely lunch break, but in between customers, they're on TikTok,
Nice.
because that's where they are today, and not that you're trying to change their behavior and say you should or shouldn't do this or that. What you're trying to do is meet them where they are and add
Yes.
value to their role. So, you know, you have to get a little bit more creative if you're used to making content for LinkedIn and engaging there. It's you gotta put that creative hat on, or bring someone in to help you think creatively about reaching that buyer on TikTok. And there's ways to do it. There's ways
Yeah.
to connect all the dots for them, that really establish your brand in front of them as part of their world.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, whether it's TikTok or YouTube or an email list or LinkedIn,
mhm,
you're right. Find where they are, find what they're paying attention to, and then get in front of them and stay in front of them.
mhm,
And in a way that's not pitchy and salesy, that's caring and loving and friendly and helpful. And that's
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 right.
all it is.
That's right. Yeah, and I would just say, to kind of bring it all full circle, what you said earlier about going and talking to your customers, I've found that it's amazing the results you get from just that simple task. Is just sitting down with your customer and asking some questions that have been on your mind. They don't know that you have those questions on your mind. They're doing their own thing. They're operating their business. They're being, in their world. But if you come into their world and ask them about a nuance of how their role operates. So whenever you buy these chemicals, where do they go? Where do you put them? Do you put them on this shelf? How quickly do you use them? How long have you been using these type of chemicals? And you start getting into their world of how they think. You realize like, oh wow, the pain point I was really trying to solve for, they were sort of buying it because it was sort of scratching the real pain point. But I've now determined what the real thing is,
Yes.
and that is that they have to buy ahead a certain amount and hide it in this closet because of the boss or whatever. Like there's this
Right.
internal world that's happening that you're not privy to.
Right.
And just having those conversations, it opens all this dialogue up, and it allows you to really identify what that world looks like and how then you can engage in a meaningful way. And instead of it just being canned and surface and,
Yes.
we're going to send an email and because that's what we were told to do. Some marketing, course told us to
Right. Right.
send an email. And so we're going
And
to
let's
send a
hope it
cold
works.
email, and it didn't
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. Now what? Yeah. Now we have to actually talk to our buyers. Oh
That's right.
no.
That's right.
Just do it now and save yourself a ton of time and a ton of stress.
That's right. Yeah. So I think if you could have the gold, the gold here is to find a way that you can be candid with your buyer, understand what's happening in their world, and in the process, create content from it that you can then put in front of that buyer and scaled to many other buyers that have the same problem that you've now identified. Because now what that's doing is you're learning, you're getting better at how to approach them, and they're helping you market to other people. That's
Yes.
that's really it's not easy to do. I think that would probably be, level 2 or 3 as you get down this road. But as you're constantly iterating, to answer this, and this last question here, you're constantly iterating. It's staying, as you said, in proximity to the buyer, staying close to them, always asking them about what's happening in their world so you can create content that adds value, so you can show up and add value, so you can build a relationship and add value. These are the things that we have to do, which is the hard work of understanding our buyer.
Yes, and it is so important and so vital. And that if you don't do it, I can almost guarantee you'll fail or you'll waste a lot of time in getting there. And it sounds like boring, difficult, scary work. But
Yes.
really, once you get started, it is the most invigorating and exciting work to do. And it's something you're going to have to keep doing. So it's not just, I don't want to do it or I'll do it once and stop. But let me just give some reassurance to the people watching this because I think that it can seem intimidating. And imagine in your job if someone were to contact you and say, I want to help you be successful in your job. I want to solve a major problem for you for free. I don't want to, sell you anything. I just want to learn what the problem is so I can help build the perfect solution for you. A lot of people, myself especially, would be like, "Sure, let me give you my laundry list of things I'm dealing with right now that I'd love to have help with. And if you can fix any one of them, that's great. And if you can't, no worries, leave me alone." So you're going to get rejected for sure, but a lot of people need help. They need your help. They need the solution that you provide. And until you go and talk to them, they can't give you what you need to help them. So just think about it from that perspective that people are not adverse or to this type of request. This is a normal thing. I've done it with my ideal buyers, with my clients, with past clients, and people are really happy to talk to you and to just vent and share their problems and their pains and their frustrations and their feelings, especially if you can reassure them and give them some guidance and encourage them that you might be able to help in the future. Maybe now, maybe not, but you have something you're working on that might be valuable to them. So go and do it. There's no excuse. Stop
Yes,
waiting. Make it to today the day that you decide we're going to go actually talk to our buyers.
that's right. Cue the outro music.
Love it.
All right. Thanks a lot, Tim. This has been amazing as I knew it would be. And thank you so much for coming back on
Thanks for having me.
for this
Always.
this series that we're doing. And I know they're going to get so much value from this. So thanks a
I
lot.
love it. So excited.